I'm always surprised because I know him from this family connection. I know him well by like everyday stories, but I would not have known that he was an artist in the beginning. And this is very special for me about Fritz Kuhr, that he's very unpretentious. You did not know that he was a Bauhaus student and teacher later on. When Hannah Höch visited his garden, my grandmother didn't know that it was Hannah Höch because they were just unpretentious. They were just normal people and they took care about people around them. My name is Ute Famulla, and I'm an art historian who's currently working at the University of Göttingen.
My name is Anja Guttenberger, and this is my podcast, Bauhaus Faces. Welcome to a new episode of Bauhaus Faces. Today's episode of my podcast is about a rather unknown Bauhausler, the Belgian-born Fritz Kuhr. Although he was at the Bauhaus for roughly 7 years, first as a student and later as a teacher, he's widely unknown. Kuhr was the student spokesperson of the Bauhaus Master Council, the Meisterrat, was part of the infamous Bauhaus band by playing the so-called bladder fiddle, the bumbas, and he helped edit and produce the Bauhaus publications with Ernst Kállai. After leaving the Bauhaus in 1930, Kuhr moved to Berlin and tried to make a living as a freelance artist. He was internationally represented by the gallery Ferdinand Möller in Berlin, and through his friend, the expressionist painter Ernst Kirchner, he got to know Arnold Buccis, the director of the Rijksbank, who collected more than 100 graphic works and 10 paintings by Kuhr, and this way saved Kuhr's material existence. And though he seemingly was a rising star as a freelance artist, this all came to an abrupt end when the Nazis defamed him as a degenerated artist and an entarteter Künstler in 1937. Kuhr stayed in Berlin during World War II. His atelier was bombed twice, and many of his works were partly or completely destroyed. After the second bombing in 1944, Kuhr was drafted into military service and became a Soviet prisoner of war. On his return to Berlin, he wrote that he is now a, quote, bird-free painter in Berlin. No studio, no light, no paper, hardly any canvases and oil colors. Nevertheless, a new beginning, made possible by the comradeship of colleagues who are also suffering. In 1948, Kuhr was appointed as university teacher at the Hochschule der Künste in Berlin. Today this is the UDK, Universität der Künste. From now on, although still consistently producing art himself, he fully concentrated on his art students. Fritz Kuhr died in 1975. For this episode, I asked fellow art historian Ute Famulla to tell Kuhr's story. Her family is closely tied to Kuhr, as her mother's family lived next door and the two families supported each other during hard times. The Famullas ended up buying the estate of Fritz Kuhr, and especially Hermann Famulla, Ute's father, dedicated the past years to trying to make Fritz Kuhr known to the public. He has given pieces to archives and museums and has created a website called fritzkurbauhausler.de, which I will of course link in the show notes for you. Here, Hermann Famulla published biographical information, a concise bibliography and a list of exhibitions about Fritz Kuhr and images of his work. Ute and I met 17 years ago when we were both volunteering at the Bauhaus archive in Berlin, and I was really happy that she invited me into her house in the Hufeisensiedlung to come and sit down with me over a cup of coffee. It was so much fun to see each other again after so many years and catch up. Thanks, Ute. In this episode, you will not hear me until the end of the podcast, as Ute grew up with Fritz Kuhr's art around her and researching his life and art as an art historian. I have nothing to add. So, let's dive into a new episode of Bauhaus Faces and shine a light on Fritz Kuhr.
My connection to Kuhr is that my mother was his neighbor in her childhood. And so it's a family tie which is connecting us, and it's been very strong because as a family, Kuhr supported my family in a time where it was very hard for my grandmother, and so the connection grew very strong, you could say familiar. My grandmother moved in die Monopolsiedlung. It's close to Ulsteinhaus in Berlin just after the war. It's not a modern estate. It's a more traditional estate. So you have more like this Heimatschutz architecture there, but it's right next to the Ulsteinhaus. And it was just people who worked for the state or for the city were allowed to move there. So my grandfather rode cars for the Berlin Senat. So this is why they got this house. And Fritz Kuhr was a professor at the University of Art, so UDK, or today UDK, at that time HDK, Hochschule der Bildenden Künste. So this is why he were able to move there 6. And after that, when Kuhr died, his wife was still living there, and my grandmother and she did a lot of vacations together and everything. And even when Jutta Kuhr died, there was a strong connection between first my uncle and the son of them, and then later on my father and the son of them. So till the death of the son of Fritz Kuhr, we had a very strong connection to his family. He was born in Belgium. We do not know a lot about his parents, but he's not an only child. He had at least 2 sisters. Both of them are connected to the Bauhaus. So the family of Fritz Kuhr has a strong connection to the Bauhaus. Kuhr was the first one who went there. But Meta Kuhr was married to Stolp and Heubener, who are quite known. She is mentioned by Patrick Rösler, for example, but yeah, we don't know too much about her. And then Lola Kuhr, or Lucia Giesenschlag, as she was named later on, is the second sister of Fritz Kuhr, who is connected to the Bauhaus. She wasn't a student herself, but she is married to Siegfried Giesenschlag, who is known as Bauhaus artist. So there is a strong connection from the family to the Bauhaus. He was in the army in the First World War. I don't have a lot of information, but he left the army after the war in East Prussia, and he decided to get to know Germany on his way back to home. Actually, I think he never really arrived at home. He strolled around, maybe that's what you can say. On his way, he got to know Otto Pankok and Hulda Pankok, and he became part of their Laienkünstlergruppe.
So it's an amateur artist group.
Yeah. And so he just traveled through Germany with them. They didn't stay at one place. They traveled around, and we don't have a lot of works from that period. It's more, but there's some left, like I think 5 or 6, and they're very expressive charcoal drawings. So they're really, really strong, but very small. One I have in mind is a drawing which shows a couple dancing, or actually 2 couple dancing. And it has a lot to do, or for me, it shows much more time-specific signs than the rest of Fritz Kuhr's work. So you really have a feeling of the 1930s or 20s, I guess. So the Weimar Republic, you get the spirit of the golden age of Germany. So it looks like swing dances and yeah. And then I think a topic he will keep, and which is already in there, is the relationship of couples, mostly male and female people, and how they interact. And so in the front, you have a couple dancing, a big one, and in the back, you see a second one, which is connected to it. But from the look, it is still, you can see the human figures, but they are already fluent, maybe.
They're melted into each other.
Yeah, they are melted into each other, and you can't really decide what part is belonging to which person. So you, as the viewer, have to do a lot of work when looking at it. You have to decide, what are they really doing? And you can actually decide a lot when looking at those works. During this time where he's just strode around, he came across a painting by Paul Klee, which is called Traumstadt. There's more than one work, Traumstadt. So we don't know which one, but one of these was so impressive for Fritz Kuhr that he decided to go to Weimar and look at this school. Yeah, then he got there and he stayed around. He wasn't allowed to study in the first place. He more like strolled around Weimar and looked there and there. And he also went into the Bauhaus, and there is this one anecdote, or this one, what Fritz Kuhr said, that in the beginning he was at the Bauhaus, and then Walter Gropius passed by, and Fritz Kuhr didn't have a big social status. He actually did not have any money or couldn't really take care of himself. So he had ripped down clothes and was very struggling, not very good looking at that time. Walter Gropius passed by him and he said, "Oh, you can't be here. I don't accept people who look like this with this ragged down clothes. You have to leave." But then after a while, he was allowed to study at the Bauhaus. And then he became very involved in it. Actually, he started in 1923 at the Bauhaus. And as I already said, he was first very taken by Paul Klee. But he had to do this first year. And there he was assigned to Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. And in the beginning, he couldn't really deal with the ideas. Or he didn't know what Moholy wanted from him. So, but he went through this class and he actually did a sculpture there, which was, I think, very important for his own way of thinking. What is art? What do I have to deal with when I do art? So this became quite influential for him. It's a sculpture. Actually, Laszlo Moholy published it, so we can see it, and we rebuild it because we wanted to know how it functions. It's called Vierdimensionale Plastik aus Glas, Metall und Holz, and it shows a wooden square where certain other elements are connected to, one big glass element and then more circles and triangles. But I think what is most important about this plastic is that it is connected to a drawing which lies under it. And on this drawing are certain circles and lines, and they reflect how the sculpture can move. Because the sculpture is not meant to be stable, but it's supposed to be in motion and change by the motion it goes through. And so you will have a changing imagination or a changing impression on the material. So Kuhr reflects on how the material changes by being in different connection to each other. So when the wood is up and the glass is down, it looks different than when the glass is down and the wood is up. And so it's about this change of material by motion.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like the light prop by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy that he later invented, like this light machine that moves around in a circle, and there are always like those shadows changing on the walls, and it's just beautiful. I imagine it's the same idea, at least.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this was highly intentioned by Moholy. Like there are a couple of those student works, and he published them, and they're similar. So this is more, I think, Moholy than it is Kuhr. But Kuhr learned a lot from this.
Well, it was probably a task, right?
Yeah.
To create a kinetic sculptures to see how the relation of the materials change to each other when it moves around.
Exactly. That's a test. He did wall painting, and this is something which he carries around a lot, I think, in his life, because he's always saying in one time he's Anstreicher, so he did the course of the Wandmalerei, the wall painting, and in the other side he is an artist. And so he splits this very early and very, very clear. And when you look through his life, you will always find the jobs he did for his life, and then he did the stuff for his art. So you always have both sides. So next to the Wandmalerei, he went to the free artist classes from Kandinsky and Klee, for example. He was a student first, and then he overtook classes. So he kind of grows in to being a teacher at the Bauhaus and grows into responsibility at the Bauhaus and becomes a teacher. In the class of Paul Klee, they got also a task, and there he painted a sunflower. And I think this is one like of the most beautiful and also such a Bauhaus Klee educational thing. On the other side, I think it's so beautiful. And Fritz Kuhr, or the students, were asked to paint das Wesen der Pflanze, so the being of the plant. Fritz Kuhr painted a sunflower, which is, very abstract already, and has more than one level. So you have the levels of the roots, and then you can kind of see the growth, even though the flower is already in total bloom, but you can kind of see how it grows. And in the structure of the painting, you have this Klee aquarelle technique. So you have this level so that it is painted in different shades. Today it is at the Bauhaus Dessau, so we didn't keep it because I think it's such an important work, so we gave it away. But I think it's a very beautiful and a very typical task from the Bauhaus education. He became more free. We had 2 student works, and then he started doing his own work, which are more freely and more from himself. And what you need to see is that next to his engagement in the wall painting, he organized at least 6 exhibitions for his artistic work at the Bauhaus. So he did student exhibitions at the Bauhaus, and his works toured with junge Bauhaus artists to Halle or whatever. So he really had this artistic side of him. And those paintings are very different. They are still very connected to reality. So you always have figures, you have animals, you have people in there. He's an abstract painter, but he doesn't do circles and triangles. He is always connected to real life. And this makes a big difference to his teachers, I think, or maybe at least to Kandinsky. He's, if you want to say so, he's closer to Klee, but then it goes on. He is connected by the Bauhaus band. He played in the Bauhaus band, the Bumbas. Teufelsgeige, I don't know the English impression. I think Bumbas is better. He was a member of the Meisterrat as a student. Kuhr mentions himself, so he talks about it himself, what it meant to him being the representative of the student at the Bauhaus. I think it was Hans Folger who was the second representative, because there were 2 representatives in the Meisterrat from student side. And Fritz Kuhr says we really talked, and we were really heard. And this was something which was very important for Gropius, because nowhere, in no school, were a student representative in such a important gremium. And on the other side, he says they even decided at one point, we will not anymore take our role as the representative of the students because we are so against what you want. He just leaves this place. And then Gropius asked them to come with him, and they had a very long discussion and both argued very, very, very strongly for hours. And in the end, they found a compromise. When he reflects on it, Kuhr later on says, in the end, Gropius wanted this. It was important for him. And it was important that Gropius saw us because it made something with us as students. We were seen and we had the feeling that we could do something and we had a real voice in this council. But in the end, there were so many Meister. So our 2 voices could never change anything, but we could be heard. And this is what changed us. And he says this is a moment, he reflects on what did his teachers give him for his own role as a teacher. And from Gropius, he takes this part of hearing his students. This is what he really thinks Gropius did very, very good, that he gave students a voice. His connection, I think, by being a member of the Meisterrat, he had just a very wide connection. He was known. Fritz Kuhr was a student when Walter Gropius was director, but then he was a teacher when Hannes Meyer was in charge. Hinak Schieper was the leader of the wall painting workshop, and at that time where he was a leader, he went to Russia because he had I actually don't know what he did there, but he had a major project there. Fritz Kuhr was his assistant, and this could be one of the times where Fritz Kuhr kind of fluently became a teacher at the Bauhaus. Because then Schieper isn't there, Lou Schieper isn't there, nobody there to handle the workshop. So who else should have done it than his assistant, who was Fritz Kuhr at this time? We do not know too much about the work which Fritz Kuhr, or the teaching work Fritz Kuhr did at that time. But there are certain Bauhaus diploma, where Fritz Kuhr is mentioned as a teacher of gegenständliches Zeichnen, Akt- und Figurenzeichnen. That's, for example, Barhelfer, Neu. There is this brochure, Junge Menschen kommt ans Bauhaus, and it's a co-op sign. So it's a corporation. There were more than 1 people working on it. It's always connected very strongly to Hannes Meyer because it's his directorate. But if you look at it, there are a lot of Fritz Kuhr artworks in it. I, for myself, believe that he was strongly involved in the creation of this brochure. There's one of his own paintings, which is at the MoMA, which was also shown at the MoMA. And then there are photographies in it. I think at least two. One more abstract, one very close to what Peter Hans did at the Bauhaus. So when he studied, the photo class wasn't installed yet. And the photographs he did at the Bauhaus are more experimental than what Peter Hans taught in his classes. We know that he did them out of his room in the Bauhaus Dessau building, so we have more than one picture from there. And I guess that he used mainly a darkroom in the Ernst Meisterhaus. It's very convenient that he did his work there because it has been quite a strong connection between Alfred Gertrude Arndt and Kuhr. I guess that he used that. He experimented a lot at the Bauhaus period, I think. We do actually also know pretty much, not all of the 6 photographies, but we know some of them because there is a map in the Bauhaus archive where the photographs which were at the FIFO exhibition in Stuttgart are shown. And so there is one image of a key which was at the exhibition in Film and Photo, which is from Fritz Kuhr. It shows like a wooden background and there is a old key lying on it. And in the wood there is something like a structure. And you can really tell if the structure is on the level, I think, of the tree or on the level with the key. I think that's a fun point. And so he is able, I would say, to do this very realistic photographs of which Peter Hans taught. But what he was dealing with more is cyanotopene. So we have a lot of cyanotopene from that time. They're typically blue and they show light bows. What we also know is that he made photographs with a camera which has a bellow. As others at the Bauhaus, he did such light movement images. So that's, he took the picture, moved the camera a bit and took a picture again. And, you know those games at the Bauhaus. And Fritz Kuhr did this also, but because he used this bellow, he didn't move the camera, but he moved the bellow. What happened is that you have the light, and then he moves the bellow, and the light's becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you more have like an illumination which is not moving, but which is evolving in size. I think the most impressive one of those works is a Laternenlichtkomposition, which is a really wonderful photograph, and was also published by Moholy Lodge in his article, which is connected to the FIFO. Who was really important for him, I think, also in the decision to become a free artist is Ernst Kállai. Ernst Kállai and he worked at the Bauhaus together, and then they decided pretty much at the same time to leave the Bauhaus.
Why did Kuhr leave the Bauhaus in 1930?
That must be mainly speculations. Like I don't have anything which tells it. What I can say is that he had an idea what he wanted to do, and he wanted to be a free artist, somebody who's just doing art. He was quite successful with it. So he was represented by Ferdinand Möller. He also had an exhibition with Cassira or Galerie Feldhäuser and Fritze. This was a gallery which also showed abstract painters in 1937, his last exhibition. He calls them the very brave gallery. So he goes to Berlin and tries to be a free artist. And there Ernst Kállai is playing a big role for him, I think.
What kind of role?
What we know today is that they planned this very big exhibition, Vision and Formal Law, also Vision und Formgesetz, where Fritz Kuhr was represented and where Kállai also in the catalog writes a lot about Kuhr's artwork. This is the one big thing which is connecting those two, but Ernst Kállai also provides at least some of the network Fritz Kuhr walks in. If you want to say he walks. He writes about him in the newspaper Das Neue Frankfurt and Die Neue Stadt. That's the second one. So when Das Neue Frankfurt becomes more international, it's called Die Neue Stadt. So Ernst Kállai publishes about Fritz Kuhr there, and he brings something in London from Fritz Kuhr. So he's kind of the one who supports him by talking about him. Another person who is important at that time is Ludwig Kirchner. Kirchner and Fritz Kuhr get to know each other. I actually don't know how they met, but over Kirchner, Fritz Kuhr becomes known to Arnold Bucci. And Bucci was one of the important collectors of Kirchner at that time. And he was a bank director in Berlin. And on one side, he took drawing classes at Kuhr, and they traveled together to the Eastern Sea and painted. He collected Kuhr as well. He is one of the important figures during also when Kuhr couldn't exhibit anymore. Bucci will buy his paintings anyway. The same Karl Hagemann. So over Kirchner, who is actually also doing a Kuhr exhibition in Davos. So when Kirchner is in Davos, Kuhr is represented in Davos through Kirchner. And also his wife is visiting Kuhr in Berlin. And Kirchner is asking Karl Hagemann to look at this new interesting artist, Fritz Kuhr. And so Hagemann also buys some Kuhr works at that time, which are found in the Städter collection. He kept in touch with Alfred and Gertrude Arndt, and there is a very interesting letter correspondence from the 1937. So when Fritz Kuhr has his last exhibitions and the NS time, the NS regime really regulates the artistic society, I would say. And Fritz Kuhr can't really paint abstract anymore, but he still says, oh, I'm abstract painter, and what shall I do? And he tries to become more figural, but he says it's just shit what I'm producing. It's not working. So he reflects with the Arndts about this, which shows how close he was to them.
Where are those letters?
They're in our estate. Actually, this one I'm talking about now was in the estate of the family Arndt. And when the daughter died, she told her daughter to give it to us. So now we have it. In this letter, he complains that the former supporters of him, like Roman or Möller, that they're not standing at his side anymore. And that the only thing you can do is keep to your own beliefs, and that you can't believe in other people, that you need to do what you think is the right thing to do. So it did a lot to him, and I think this is what is also very specific about Fritz Kuhr. He's one of this generation who were in the footsteps of becoming a big artist, or maybe not a big, but who could have the possibility to become an artist who can live from his work. And then he was named an Entarteter Künstler, so he couldn't work anymore. And it was just, it was over. And then when the war stopped, the old ones, Klee, Kandinsky, and all those former heroes, you could say, are putting back into line. When you think about the Documenta or so, it's the big names from before the war who are reinstalled. And the ones who were just who were just developing in the 1930s, the ones who were standing in line, kind of, they did not have the name to be reinstalled. So it would have been his task after the World War to go out again and show himself. But at this time, Kuhr, who was so well connected that he's becoming a professor at the Hochschule der Künste in Berlin, so he was well connected. He had his job. But at that point, he's not deciding to say, oh, I'm the big artist, but he's saying, oh no, I have students and they will become artists. They are important. It's the future who is important, not the work I'm doing at the moment. I think he looked after himself as well, because he painted all the time, and it was very important for him to do his own artistic work and to show it, but it wasn't important to claim it so much. It was important to do it. It wasn't so important for him to be famous. I mean, after World War II, he had connections to Hannah Höch. He had connections to Friedrich Schröder-Sonnenstern, who is an important figure in West Berlin. So he had this scene. He moved. He did something, but he didn't want to claim the stuff he did before World War II. I'm not so sure yet, but there is at least a time in the in World War II, when the Nazis were already in power, where he says, at the Bauhaus, we had these big ideas, but in the end, we didn't do anything better than anybody else. It didn't help anything. So he's very self-critic about his time at the Bauhaus. He's saying something about we thought we understood something, but in the end, we haven't learned anything. And then he's saying, I'm not saying that I could have gone anywhere else and could have learned something somewhere else. But he's saying, it wasn't worth anything. And I don't know because he's writing this in 1937. So this is at the point where he's really stuck, where he had a good perspective and this perspective is taken from him. So he must be somehow
desperate.
Yeah. This is a conclusion he's drawing at a certain time. In this perspective, he did not have a name as Moholy or Gropius who could go somewhere and show, I was this, I've done this and that, and I have taught and I have, and this is not the case with Fritz Kuhr. And on the other side, he has his network still in Germany. He had work. He was still working, not as an artist, but as a craftsman. So here his education as Anstreicher comes back into mind. He was a restorator. He restored the Kronprinzenpalais in Berlin. So he worked for the museums of Berlin. And we know that he recreated the facade when he mentioned that he is doing reconstruction work for the museums. So he's saying when something was damaged because of the war, of bombs or anything, he was the one who restored the artwork. And we don't know if he's just doing buildings. We know for sure that he's doing buildings, but it can be that he also was in charge for restoring other art pieces. So, but this is what he did during wartime, and at that time during the NS regime, he also did the typographical work for the Deutsche Haus am Potsdamer Platz. So he knew how he would get food and how he could pay his rent. He wasn't a Jew, and he wasn't in danger. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he couldn't work as artist anymore, but he was not in threat. After the war, he reflects about staying in West Germany or going to East Germany. And he decides to stay in West Germany because he's an abstract painter. So he really makes this decision for him and his art. It is the right place to be in West Germany. But in the beginning, he still has cooperations with East Berlin artists. And so it's again a little bit fluent. He became a professor and he worked with his students, and this is what interested him. He wanted to work. And I mean, he went to the US when Gropius invited all the Bauhaus people. Yes, he did that. And he was present in the MoMA exhibition with a couple of works. So he was seen by Gropius. But as much as he was a part of this Gropius Bauhaus, he was a very important part of the Meyer Bauhaus. And there was a conflict between these two. Mm. And so it's interesting because, for example, for Meta Stolp or Meta Häubner or Meta Kuhr, how you want to call her, because Häubner died at the Capacona, and then she was alone and she had trouble getting things together, kind of. And Gropius was asked to send care packages. But then Hannes Meyer sends the care packages. So, the Kuhr family is more connected to Meyer than to Gropius. And Kuhr is in between. Fritz Kuhr is in between. He's on both sides. And so when in Stuttgart the 50 years Bauhaus exhibition was, he was, I think, taking part with 6 huge paintings. Mm. But he kept his contacts to the Meyer Bauhaus as well. And he was very political. So in the Bauhaus time, he had a group of communist students. Actually, we don't know too much about it. So I think that the recognition of Fritz Kuhr, that he is not seen as such an active person in this Bauhaus story, is also that he stays in between Gropius and Meyer. So on one side, he has been a member of the Meisterrat as a student at the Gropius time, and he really he did this very iconic speech when Gropius left the Bauhaus. He stepped forward as a student and said, "Gropius, you can't leave us behind. You need to stay with us. We need you here at the Bauhaus. You can go." And then on the other side, he became a teacher and somebody who was very active at the Meyer time. So he is neither nor, and both wrote their story, and Fritz Kuhr is somewhere in between. And I think this has a lot to do why he is not seen so much as maybe others. When you ask for motifs, it's mainly humans, trees, and animals. So it's really basic. He has times where it's becoming very abstract, but still you can see the figures somewhere in it, in the cubes and circles. And there is a figure. You just have to look long enough. And when you look at it from how it developed, he really starts with this very expressive and not academic figure. So very learned from himself and from nature, kind of. So just by trying. And then he steps into the education at the Bauhaus, where I think his artistic work grows closer to the ideas which are taught there. So he's becoming more abstract, and he is doing a lot of also typographical work. And there he pretty much, does what he has been taught. And then he leaves the Bauhaus and becomes more free. I always connect him at this time a lot with Franz Roh and his surrealistischen Expressionismus. So this is what Fritz Kuhr belongs to from an art historical point of view. He always has this connection about something which lies between people, or maybe behind people or inside people. So if he shows something, he never shows a realistic scene, even though there are trees and animals and figures or humans. It's always something which is more on a background or something in between, or something which has something to do with mind work. So this is what his scenes are. And then this time comes where he is ein entarteter Künstler. So he's also named in the NS propaganda as an entarteter artist. So he can't work anymore, or at least his last exhibition is in 1937. And after that, can show his work. And he actually tries to paint realistic, but he doesn't show his work. It seems like he does not do any big paintings. He's more sketching. So he kind of keeps in touch with his art. He just went to war very late. He got a job during war. It's at the wood industry at Schloss Wiepersdorf from the family of von Arnim. Bettina Enke was his close friend who arranged this. He also had his first flat was bombed, he moved into the flat from Bettina Enke. Then he got this job, so he didn't have to go to military, and he never really worked in the wood industry. He said if anybody would have looked at our hands, he would know that we are not working. But we have a lot of sketches from that time where he shows life at Schloss Wiepersdorf, and people who cook, people who do handwork, and also landscapes where you always have, like when I was young, I always thought, oh, what a beautiful sky, because it's so red. But actually it's a burning Berlin, you see. So they have more a documentary character than you think. And he plays also, so he paints like just the field or the forest or something. And then he finds signs to paint, for example, a tree. It's just a line. But then when you look closer, you sometimes see written in the drawing. So I think that the works which are at this period are more something where he's really doing handcraft. He tries to do something. He keeps in touch with his own practice, but he's not creating any big piece of art, something he would call art. He's more doing sketches. And he's also discussing this with Bettina Enke, who he also, like Bettina Enke also painted and drew, and they talked about it in letters, and they say that they can't really work because there's such a big shadow over them. And then after the war, he needs some time to get back. He does typographical work for the Uhlenspiegel, but he's not straight away back to his artistic work. It becomes less realistic. The first sketches, they become much more colorful. It feels like he's free. Like you look at these images and you think, what a yellow, what a blue, what a green. And it's mainly street views from Berlin. So you have a bridge in red and the blue. And later on, then he becomes more abstract, and then you can tell that he's really trying again. He's really getting into what is art, what do I want from art. He's dealing with certain things, and how can I show something which is important for me and society. Then it becomes more abstract, and he's bringing forms into more than one level. So if you look at a late image of Fritz Kuhr, you mainly have more than one level, maybe 1, 2, or 3 levels where something is taught, but those levels go into each other. So he's telling kind of 3 stories, but those 3 stories he's telling are mixed. They are overlining each other. So you have maybe a woman who is in the first area, she is made out of a silhouette, and in the back, the silhouette is the main body, but she is corresponding to somebody else in both layers. So, and it becomes more complex, but this work with layers, which is somehow also in his early works, because you have 2 figures who are representing the same person. This is found in his later works again. Fritz Kuhr, he has been mainly recognized, or if he has been recognized, you could say he's been recognized as a Bauhaus artist, but he is then at the UDK in Berlin, or HDK, and this is when most of his work was created. So actually there is a lot to be seen and found in his works. Fritz Kuhr was married 2 times. The first wife at the time when he was still active in the Bauhaus in Dessau, and the woman was called Elise Kamp-Enkel. There had been a connection during all the time because they have a child. And one of the images from Fritz Kuhr in the atelier in the Bauhaus Dessau building, he has a little child in his arms. That's his girl. That's his daughter. And we have a image where the whole family sits in the atelier house. But those 2, they were married, but they never moved together. Elise always lived with her parents for a long time, but Fritz Kuhr always paid maintenance. And this is quite interesting because the family was living in the DDR and Fritz Kuhr was living in the BRD. So they didn't do it the straight way. But the brother of Elise, he and Fritz Kuhr, they met at parking areas at the transit station from Berlin to the BRD, so from Berlin to West Germany. And Fritz Kuhr went there, and the brother came to the parking places at the transit streets. And then they exchanged the money. So there was a connection. And there is actually a relative still living. So the daughter had a son. So they never broke. So Fritz Kuhr always had a warm and good relationship to his daughter. He went into divorce just after the war. So even though they weren't a couple anymore, they stayed married for quite a long time. And first, when he met his second wife, Jutta, she was a student of him. He divorced and married again. And then this is a couple who lived next to my grandmother. They have a son who was called Axel Kuhr. And he became like the best mate of my uncle. When Fritz Kuhr died in February 1975, the first thing what happened was that the estate was kind of organized by his wife and my grandmother. So what the 2 women did was that they put everything together and put it in Leitsordner, and most of the things are punched because of that. And other things were like sketches also were put in maps, but it's really something which hurts the art historian heart when you see how many of the papers have holes. His wife died after a while, and his son lived in the atelier from Fritz Kuhr for quite a long time. So actually, for a long time, it was still in place. But he wasn't so interested in the work of Kuhr, and he sold some of it. So, Kuhr has also a lot of works from other artists from the Bauhaus and from just connections. So Axel sold probably the worthy pieces of art. There was this moment where he just wanted to get rid of it. And this is where my family kind of steps in, because I think for her it was unthinkable that all those works were just thrown away. And so we bought it from Axel Kuhr. In the beginning, we did not have any space or anything to put it. So it came into our garage. You had to be active and fast. And there was a time in my childhood where we couldn't use our garage because it was all full of. He opens the door and it was Fritz Kuhr. Yeah, and since then my father has organized a lot of exhibitions, and he went through all the papers and paintings and everything, and so everything has an inventory number. Today we created a web space where we try to inform people about Fritz Kuhr and about his work, so you can have a look at his photographs and at his paintings. It's called Fritz Kuhr Bauhausler.de. It is all homemade, so it's a private work. It's what my father did after he retired, and I became interested. Maybe Fritz Kuhr has some part of me becoming an art historian. The Bauhaus archive has quite a bit of Fritz Kuhr because his former girlfriend Hildegard Maglaschwili, who was his girlfriend during the Nazi period, everything she owned was given to the Bauhaus archive, and Fritz Kuhr himself gave some works to the Bauhaus, actually on loan, but he's represented there, and we decided to give important works to Bauhaus Dessau and to Weimar, so that he's represented in museums, but everything else is mainly still in our hand. You need to keep in mind that Fritz Kuhr was bombed 2 times during World War II, and he tells that he's running over the street collecting his works. And these early works from him have, a lot of times they have signs from fire or from they're ripped, so they're mainly hurt. I think it tells something. So we discussed how we should handle this, and I think they should just stay as they are because they are saying so much. From the Bauhaus time, maybe we don't have a lot of written down memories, but from the UDK time we have it, and this is mainly published, or this is what I published in the catalog. Also wird gemalt, der Bauhausler Fritz Kuhr, which was an exhibition at the museum in Ahrenshoop. This is mainly text from Fritz Kuhr himself. So I put together because I thought it's important to get to know what he thought. I think it's maybe like 20 to 30, which were in Fritz Kuhr's personal property. But then some of his works were surviving because they were at the Galerie Möller. And first after World War II, Fritz Kuhr asked Ferdinand Möller to get them back because Möller didn't have a place in Berlin at that time. So Fritz Kuhr changed his gallery to the Galerie Rosen. Mm-hmm. So he was represented by Galerie Rosen. During World War II, there was a Bauhaus exhibition, a touring exhibition, which was organized by Frau Weidler. She was also a Bauhaus person. We actually have some letters from Frau Weidler in the estate. Those images went 1939 to Gropius, so they didn't come back to us. I mean, there are works at Harvard. There are some color designs and photos. I mean, I am guessing that Gropius took a whole package of the FIFO map. Photos are reproducible, so there's not just one set of photos which went to the FIFO exhibition. And there are quite a lot cool photographies at the art market in America. But we do not know which works have been with Frau Weidler. We just know that she had works and that she gave them to Gropius. And then it becomes unclear what happened. You wrote down which is my favorite work of Fritz Kuhr. It's a bird. This image is actually cut. So you have a very dark blue figure, which is something between a female human and a bird. It's transforming maybe, and it's kind of hugging itself. So it's very intimate and very concentrated of the own person. And then in the background, you have a varying shade of blue colors. It's cut on the sides. It is cut because it was burned. It was one of the works which is made before the Second World War and was damaged during one of the bombings of his atelier. And then he cut it. And for me, this shows so much. I think this bird is very fragile. It's kind of lost. Special is this work because it's cut, because it shows that time and invalidity, freedom is fragile, and that it's something we have to take care of.
Fritz Kuhr may not be known to many, and those who do know him, they probably know him from his historical speech upon the farewell of Walter Gropius from the Bauhaus, where Kuhr stepped forward and gave an iconic speech stating, "Even though we often disagreed with you, you were the guarantee for us that the Bauhaus would not become a school. We were starving for an idea here in Dessau. You must not stop now." Fritz Kuhr was part of a younger generation that was prevented from further establishing themselves as internationally renowned artists, interrupted by World War II and massively denounced by the Nazis as degenerated. In a letter by the well-known Bauhaus metal designer Marianne Brandt, a woman who was of the same generation as Kuhr and who also struggled immensely during and after World War II, she wrote to Kuhr and complained that the Bauhaus is recognized as an important movement of the Weimar Republic, but that she is not seen as an artist and that Kuhr is not recognized either. I just want to highlight that for a second. An artist like Marianne Brandt put herself on the same level as Fritz Kuhr, and by that we are able to understand which kind of future Kuhr had in the cards. Me, personally, I always thought that this was something that only happened to women who studied and worked at the Bauhaus. During my interview with Ute, however, I realized that this might be wrong. It also happened to male Bauhaus artists. And maybe in Kuhr's case, Ute thinks, this could have been further enhanced by the conflict between Walter Gropius and Hannes Meyer, who both wrote their own history of the Bauhaus. And while Kuhr was the student representative at the Bauhaus when Gropius was the director, he was also very active and taught at the Bauhaus when Meyer headed the school. Like with Marianne Brandt, who lived in Saxonia, Kuhr kept in touch with many of his Bauhaus friends who decided to stay in the GDR for as long as he could. He was always close to leftists and communists, but never a member of the Communist Party. In fact, never a member of any party. Kuhr's work is today in archives in Germany and in the US, at the Städel Museum, the Bauhaus Archive Berlin, the Bauhaus Dessau Foundation, and at the Harvard Art Museums. I will put all of the relevant links to the website and to the publications about Fritz Kuhr into the show notes of this episode. I hope we can help Hermann and Ute Famulla with this episode of Bauhaus Faces to make Fritz Kuhr known a little more. And if you're now interested in seeing Fritz Kuhr's artwork with your own eyes, follow me on Instagram at Bauhaus Faces Podcast, where I will publish a selection of bonus material over the next days. Or go and visit the website fritzkurbauhausler.de. If you are listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, you can also look at the changing chapter images while listening. And last but not least, there's a little favor I would like to ask you. Please subscribe to and rate Bauhaus Faces wherever you are now listening. Tell your friends, colleagues, and family about it, because personal recommendations are what makes a podcast grow most, and we still want to grow, right? And now there's nothing left to say but tune in next time for a new episode of Bauhaus Faces.